After hearing Ronnie and Steve and Bill and Liz and Sean talk essentially about a growth mindset without specifically naming it, I thought this topic was on task. How many of you are familiar with the words growth mindset? Okay. In Silicon Valley here, I love this quote: "The mindset you choose for yourself has a profound impact on how you live your life." And I have seen, as Mark said, we've worked with thousands of women relaunching careers, and a lot of them will come to us and say, who's going to hire me? I have no confidence. I'm not a digital native. How do I learn all this new technology? And those are all elements of a fixed mindset. And so that's why we started teaching this, because we found, and they often say this is one of the most valuable shifts they've made in their attitude, because they then start to embrace learning and growing, which is what all of us have to do, whether you're millennial or you're closer to my age or above. We all have to keep reinventing ourselves, and that's what the theme of this whole conference has been. In Silicon Valley here, this term growth mindset has become part of the vernacular. Around Christmas time, my son was out front doing some things, and he saw this dad with his about 5-year-old daughter on her new bike, riding down the street, and the daughter kept falling off, and finally the dad says, "Growth mindset, Lucy, growth mindset." So everyone is saying this. It's a little funny how it's become part of the norm. The growth mindset grew out of Carol Dweck's body of work, and she's right here at Stanford. And she found that in graduate school, she was really intrigued by this notion that some people really crumble and back away from challenges, and other people really rise to challenges. And she was curious to find out what that was all about. And as she started doing research, and all of this is research-based, I'm not going to get into the research, but if you're interested in it, feel free to get her book there on mindset. But she found that the key difference between those two groups I mentioned was their mindset. It was as simple as that. And the question she asked was, does success come from talent or effort? So we'll take a quick vote. How many vote for talent? How many vote for effort? Okay, you guys have a growth mindset. So the people who rely on talent, they think that the moment things stop coming easily, they have hit the limits of their gifts. And so they're done, they back off, they don't want to try, they don't want to fail. People who believe that success comes from effort, when things stop being easy, that's when they see opportunities to learn and to grow, and they actually embrace that. This is a long quote, but I wanted to make sure you had the whole message of what a growth mindset is all about. People believe their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, that brains and talent are just the starting point, and this creates a love of learning and resilience. And what I also love about a growth mindset is it makes you a lot less reliant on feedback from others. It's about growing and, negative feedback, of worrying what other people think. Feedback is good, as Liz has pointed out. The other key tenet of a growth mindset is how we think about failure. And you've heard this theme over the last few days as well. Failure, and you've seen Tim Brown, he's been quoted quite a bit too, but this is a different quote from him from IDEO. Don't think of failure, think of it as designing experiences through which you're going to learn. And in fact, there's a lot of quotes around, if you're not failing, you are not innovating, or you're not taking risks. And certainly here in Silicon Valley, taking risks is a big thing. So I put this one in because last night I went to bed thinking I was going to be talking to you about design thinking, and I called an audible, so if Mark thinks I can't speak football, I switched. That's about as far as it goes. So, but the reason I switched is because as I was on the Hornblower cruise talking with many of you and throughout the last 2 days, I realized I was making two faulty assumptions. One is that I assumed that accomplished football players like yourselves naturally have a growth mindset. You know, you have grit, You are always, I think, trying to improve. You are always listening for feedback. I'm sure you're failing a lot of the time and getting up. But I talked to many of you, and you said, actually, I don't think I have a growth mindset. I think I was blessed with a lot of talent and athleticism. And that, I hadn't really thought of that. You know, we do, and I'm going to share a story in a little bit about another example of that. Sometimes we have these amazing gifts, and when things come easily, it may look like a growth mindset, but really it's using this amazing set of talent. So that was one assumption I was making. The second one, a lot of you I think do have a growth mindset, but what I kept hearing from a lot of you is that while you used this in your football life, it's really hard to apply it in your professional life. And I think, you know, I sat at that coaching table yesterday, and a lot of people came up, and I'm hearing the same theme, that, you know, I get into business or the working world, and I don't receive feedback the same way as I did when I was coached, or I don't want to take risks, or I'm afraid of failure. It's interesting, and I'll give you one example of how mindset can vary from situation to situation. So nobody has a growth mindset in everything all the time. So I think of myself as somebody who has a fairly strong growth mindset. I've always loved learning. I want to learn till I'm, you know, if I'm not dead, I'm not done. So I want to keep learning. However, there's one place I have a fixed mindset. It's in the kitchen. And I just don't, you know, I'm getting better, I'm working at it, but I've never had a love for cooking. And as I was doing this work and thinking back, I realized, I think a lot of the reason is I had a perfectionist mother. And every time I tried, and she was a great cook, and every time I tried to help her in the kitchen, nothing I did was good enough. It wasn't, you know, I didn't measure the teaspoons perfectly, I didn't crack the eggs right, I didn't mix the yolks, whatever it was, I couldn't do it right. She was honestly, she's, you know, rest in peace, but she was a diminisher in the kitchen. And so I just quit. I said, I can't do it, I can't please her, I'm just not gonna do it. Fortunately, cooking came in on the next generation. My daughter's a great cook, so it just skipped a generation. But it's an example where, as I'm gonna put up a few slides to help you think about your own growth mindset, it's gonna vary from situation to situation and life phase to life phase. So some things to think about. There's 3 questions I have up here. One is, when you face challenges, okay, and I'm going to let you just absorb this, and then I'd love to hear from you what's going on in your heads. Do you feel anxious, incompetent, defeated? Or B, do you rise to the challenge? Second question, if someone is better than you at something that you value, is your reaction A, to feel nervous or envious and threatened, or B, to be eager to learn? And then finally, how do you react to criticism? Do you look for an excuse? Do you become defensive, angry, crushed? Do you have a desire to look smart? Liz talked about being the smartest one in the room is an accidental diminishing tendency. Or do you view it as an opportunity for growth? So if you were in column A much of the time, those are exemplary of a fixed mindset, and B is more of a growth. Does anyone have any observations that they're thinking about? Does this have resonance with any, either in football or in beyond football? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what they're thinking about is that it's dynamic, though. Even within the context of a single topic or situation, I could think of being on both sides of that chart.
Can you give a quick example?
So I could feel anxious about an opportunity or a task at the same time, and excited to face the challenge.
Okay, so that's great. So he said he could feel nervous or anxious at the same time as being excited. To me, that's a lot of what Liz talked about, the stretching. You know, you want to really grow. You want to have a little of that discomfort that she talked about. I think growth mindsets require a lot of discomfort. I mean, every time we teach classes, we do surveys. And every time, my partner Patty, I'm like, oh, I hate reading these surveys because I'm kind of a perfectionist. I like to get some good marks, and they're usually pretty good, but there's always a few that you don't like to read. And she always says to me, growth mindset, and it's true. And I think that what has allowed me to hopefully improve as a speaker is keep reading all that feedback and incorporating it, but it is definitely uncomfortable. Any other comments or observations? Yeah.
Look at this primarily fixed. I'm just, you said you assumed most football players have a growth mindset?
I would have assumed that until I started talking to some of you.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that I feel I'm less anxious when I win. So there's a lot of motivation to rise to the challenge and win, and I feel negative when I don't. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that that's actually a fixed mindset. We're not out there to have a learning opportunity where we're trying to win a football game. We're trying to win. We don't want to lose.
So you're suggesting that while you're playing the game, that might be the time to have a fixed mindset?
I mean, I'm just saying that's how I think it may be. I'm not saying that's not. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's how it might be.
That's interesting. Any thoughts on that? You're nodding?
Well, it's definitely, you're going in with a game plan. It takes a lot of experience sometimes maturing from a sophomore to a junior to a senior to realize you can have that learning experience, realize how to have that learning experience, apply it in game. Mm-hmm. So it seems like with the maturity, you can go from a fixed to the growth mindset and having those in-game learning experiences when you make a mistake.
Great. So I think what I'm hearing is that, during a game when the pressure's on, that is not the time to take risks and fail, right? That's the time to go with a plan. So the point you're making, and I haven't thought a lot about growth mindset with football until today, maybe playing games is the time to apply more of a fixed mindset. Did you have a comment on that?
I just had a question. Do you feel like a fixed mindset is natural and it takes intentionality to have that growth mindset because fixed is so safe?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have two brothers. One is Ron Johnson that Liz mentioned. The other is another. And I would say that we came out of the womb with a certain mindset. And all of her research, Ron has about the biggest growth mindset I've seen. And my other brother is not embracing the growth mindset, let's just say, and never has. We'd play games at dinner table, and he, sort of didn't want to play. That was not his thing. He's never ordered an Uber. He doesn't want to learn how. That's just who he is. That being said, so I do think there is some innate kind of mindset that you are born with, and her research would prove that it starts very early. It does not mean, though, that you cannot change your mindset. And being aware of the impact your mindset is going to have on your career, I can pretty much guarantee you having a fixed mindset is going to limit your career. I have yet to read about in her research a career that does not benefit from a growth mindset. And maybe there are times, if you're a commander and it's time for war, maybe that's the fixed mindset time where it's command but for the most part, companies are going to reward innovative thinking and creativity, and the best companies are going to reward risk-taking, and they're going to create an environment that lets you fail. And that was a big part of the whole multiplier discussion too, was being able to fail and get feedback and grow. So I like to remind people that this is a journey. I don't have a fixed mindset every day in everything, but by growing some antenna about what is a fixed and a growth mindset, and when I do coaching with groups, we go through this, and then we'll meet about a month later, and we'll talk about in what instances did you apply a fixed or a growth mindset this month. And the stories are incredible. When people say, I really got out of my comfort zone, I asked for feedback, I went to my boss with a new idea, it's almost always a huge growth experience for them. And for those of you who are a little bit closer to my age, I love this quote that people who perceive themselves as lifelong learners are often super agers, remaining vital and cognitively resilient through old age. And this has been, again, proven by research quite a bit. I know you can't read much of this, but I wanted to put it in because we give out this list of 25 ways to develop a growth mindset, and I'm happy to send it to you. We didn't have it printed for the things because I thought I was going to be talking about design thinking, but if you email me and say 25 ways, I will send it to you. And the story I wanted to share on this is my partner and I gave this at a group of Harvard Business School female alumni. And like you know, most of them are fairly accomplished and bright and have done well academically. And again, I assumed that this would correlate with a growth mindset. And so we shared this list of 25, and then we finished the presentation, and this one woman came up, and she had tears. And she said, I've realized that all my life I have had a fixed mindset. And she goes, I cannot even do number one on that list. And number one is embrace imperfection. And she said, I've always been a perfectionist. I was naturally gifted with smarts. And I got to business school, and I killed it, and I worked, you know, but now I'm in the professional world, I'm in business, and I realize I won't try something if I can't succeed, if I can't do it perfectly. I won't take risks, I won't make recommendations, I don't suggest things, I have a fear of failure. And it was this like aha moment that it was really holding her back. So I would encourage you to think about in which situations, you know, this might be true with you, this whole movement, I'm going to leave this up while I do some Q&A, and I have a couple final slides. But parents, we grew up, you know, everybody got a trophy. Maybe that was your generation. Everyone got a trophy for participating. There's now, and you know, you're so smart, you're so good at that. The new research suggests that if you want to give your children a gift, best thing you can do is to help them to take on challenges, to take on new things, be intrigued when they make mistakes, help them take risks, enjoy the effort, and keep on learning. And I wish I had known this, you know, 27 years ago when I had my first child, but I think it's great advice, and I hope that, you know, you think about that when you start families. What questions do you have? Yeah.
You talked about taking risks. How do you calculate what type of risk is the right one in a professional context? For instance, you want to take on more, but you don't want to be fully competent in tasks. So how do you find that balance?
You want to take on more risk, but you don't want to be what?
Wholly incompetent in tasks.
Wholly incompetent.
So how do you find
Yeah.
the right balance of risk taking and showing your effect?
Well, I would suggest finding some smart colleagues, friends, bosses, and running them up the flagpole. I mean, that's how our team does it. We are always coming up with new programs to try, and I throw them out there. We don't go forward if people don't think it's a good idea, but I value collaboration, and I have never yet been let down by having more good input into my idea. So I would find someone in the hall, I would prep them before a meeting if I'm going to propose it to a higher stakes group. That also gets you some advocacy so that when you bring it up, you have some support. Does that help? Yeah.
I think probably a common struggle that all of us in this room have when it workforce, you go from pretty set measurables, you get graded on film and everything, and then with this growth mindset, what's some tactics or strategies that you recommend to kind of identify measurables and help us measure our growth and our progress throughout our professional and adult lives?
Sure. So the question was, how do we measure our growth, right? A lot of research has suggested that people who are most engaged, most happiest, most fulfilled at work are those who are making progress. That is the number one thing. Are we making progress? And so for our team, I have incorporated OKRs, which is John Doerr wrote a book about it. Google uses it. A lot of companies use them. It stands for Objectives and Key Results. And they suggest as a best practice to have no more than 3 or 5 objectives. So that is, what are we trying to achieve? And then the key results are, how are we going to measure that we've done it? And then the third layer under that is initiatives. What are the key initiatives? So as an example, let's say that I want to get 5 new corporate clients. We do gender diversity consulting work. I want to get, let's say 3. So my objective would be to promote gender diversity among cultures in Silicon Valley. My key results would be 3 new clients. And then my initiatives, we may have to call 20 clients. We may have to have, we may need a new deck to sell with. We may, what are the tactical things we need to do to achieve that objective? And then probably once a month, our team sits down, we look at our OKRs, but even more frequently in our Monday team meetings, we say, what happened this week? What were the meetings we had this week? What did we accomplish? I personally feel that is, it's a great way to measure it, and it's a great way to keep people engaged and feeling like you're moving in the right direction. What else? Yeah.
Any actionable items that you can think of to help a team or a company move in the spectrum from fixed mindset more to the growth mindset?
Yes, and I'd suggest Blake emailing me for the 25 tips, because those are, what I would do is take those lists and pass it out to your team and say, let's each pick one to work on. And one of my personal favorites is adding the word yet. So, we can't do that, or we haven't done that yet. Another one I love, and this is a little bit of design thinking I'm throwing in here, but they teach you to reframe questions, not how can we, not can we do something, which leads to yes or no, but how might we? And it's amazing how that opens up generative thinking by just rephrasing that question. Design thinking is all about language and the power of language and yes and that's another great team building thing that will help a lot. We have a rule in our team, there's no butting. You can't say, yes, but. If you don't like the idea, you say, yes, and we could do this. So it's an amazing, we do a little improv exercise when I teach design thinking, where you replace the word but with the word and all of a sudden people feel safe. You will instantly turn yourself from a diminisher to a multiplier if you get rid of the word but, and you can make it part of your whole culture. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. Do I have time for one last question? Yeah.
You just touched on it a minute ago, but I was just curious, what do you feel is the connection with growth mindset, fixed mindset, multiplier, diminisher?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a big question. I think they're all tied together. I think, and I'm really thinking on the fly here, but I would bet if you looked at all those multiplier personality traits, they would be consistent with a growth mindset. Right? Are you nodding? I can't imagine having a manager with a fixed mindset is going to really build that team. So I would think that they may not be a direct overlap, but I would think there's a correlation between a growth mindset and being a multiplier. And certainly, part of being a multiplier is being open to feedback, and that is a huge part of growth mindset. In fact, I sat through Liz's thing again. I sat through it last year, but Monday our team is going to sit down, I decided, and we're going to each go through and say, how are we accidental diminishers, and share with each other. And so, that's another idea you could do is, what are we doing that is diminishing as we work as a team? Okay, I'm going to close with a couple slides because of the work I do in gender diversity, and I have a captive audience of our future male leaders. I'm going to take this opportunity to send a message. There's a slide that I love from Bill's book, and Bill was one of my mentors that really encouraged me to do the work I'm doing. And we didn't talk about it yesterday, but it's my favorite point of his. He says in the book, get to the table, winning depends on having the best team, and the best teams have more women. Yet if you look at corporate America, and this is based on thousands of companies that BCG did research on. This is the career track for men, and it's, if you can't read it, the midline is manager and then up to CEO. And here is the career track for women. So women are starting at around 50+%, but by managerial level, they're dropping. There's all kinds of reasons for that, and that's what we do work with companies around. But one of them is they don't have the same informal networks, and you guys are so fortunate to have this network. I think it's like such a gift that you have this, and I hope you take advantage of it. Women don't have that typically. And that's why you see a lot of women's employee resource groups starting up, because they need to develop these kinds of networks. On a recent study, they looked at leadership traits, and based on 360 reviews, how do women stand up against men? It was really enlightening to see that women actually outscore men on almost every front. I don't say that to say we need to be run by women. I say that because there's enough men that I work with that don't really think women can be leaders. And I want you to walk away knowing women can and should be part of your team, and you're going to have the strongest team if you do that. So you're all familiar with the Rooney Rule, I assume. I'm going to initiate today the Campbell Rule. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is, as you go out and mentor, which I hope you all do, is that you pick a woman to mentor for every man that you're mentoring. So think about that. I think it would have a tremendous impact on our world, and I think it would help create the world we all want to see. So thank you.